Hello, and welcome to episode 70 of the Notcast, where I talk about whatever I feel like, whenever I feel like it, to a small number of people. And it's kind of weird because I'm sat here, my mobile phone is on a shelf, and I'm looking in my own eyes, which is kind of weird and a wee bit creepy. So it's the 18th of March 2021, and that means that 1 year ago today, um, I made the decision at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon that we were going to work from home for the next few weeks, in the hope that we would be able to reduce the risk of infection and transmission of COVID. And so I kind of switched everything off, locked everything up, made sure everything was put away, shut all the doors, and I thought, okay, I'll be back in April, maybe May. Might drag it out an extra week or two, just to be sure. And I've been working from home in this room for the past year now, and it's been a really, really strange year. When it all started, I kind of remember, kind of like late January, early February. We were a little concerned. We were not sure because this thing was COVID was new and weird, and how are you going to be able to operate a society where you have to keep your distance from people? What happens if people are coughing near you? Is it safe to interact with strangers? Is it safe to sit next to somebody on a train? Is it safe to commute into London, and be jammed up against someone that you've never met before, whose name you don't know, for hours on end? We had all of these questions which were racing around our brains, and then they were kind of saying, is it safe to have meetings? Is it safe to talk to people? If I was young enough to go out and snog strangers, would that put my life at risk? And the news just got worse and worse, and the guidance that we were getting from the government was confusing and contradictory. There were lots of different rules that they were kind of talking about at the time. It was very unclear what you could and couldn't do. Should or shouldn't you interact? I think the last time I went for a meeting which wasn't at my workplace was the 11th of March. And I felt quite exposed then. People weren't wearing masks. But there was very definitely less people on the trains, less people on the tubes, less people travelling. And normally if I went through London for work, I went for a meeting in Reading, normally I'd kind of sit there and go, actually, I could get a couple of hours shopping, buying records in London. And I just kind of felt, I don't feel safe doing this. And normally, about once a month I go and work in London for a day or for a meeting or for somewhere that passes through London. So I normally have a thing where I come back and I buy records for a couple of hours, and sometimes I go to the pub with friends. And I wasn't sure. I didn't feel safe. And now we're at the point where it's been a year since then. And it's been a really strange and weird year. At any point in time, we are always living through history. I just wish living through history would be, well, both a little less boring and a little more boring at the same time. There's so much news, and there's all the normal news things don't go away. They still happen, but then there's all the extra stuff that happens on top of it. So a year ago yesterday, we were due to see Stuart Lee in Canterbury at the Marlow, and that was cancelled. That was the first of that was, he played two shows. We were going to go and see the second show because Tuesdays works better than Mondays. He did the Monday, cancelled the Tuesday, and that show has now been postponed through to March 2022. So we've had to live with a 2-year cancellation. Hang on a second, cat's eating something. cat was eating a rubber band. And we had Stuart Lee at the Marlow, and then we didn't have anything. And I haven't seen almost all of my friends for over a year. I've seen one show since March the 7th, 2020. And, you know, I know some people get to 1-2 gigs a year, maybe-ish, normally at the big stadium. Normally they might go and see, I don't know, a comedian at the O2, and they might go and see a stadium rock band every summer if they're feeling particularly adventurous, and that feels like they know what it's like to go to a gig. Whereas me and some of my friends, we go to see far too many shows, far too many bands, far too many nights out. You know, I think my biggest gig year was 2017, where I saw 109 shows, and I've gone to less than 1% of that in the past year. It's been really hard and really difficult, and I've had to try and turn this into an advantage and go, well, now's the opportunity that I've got to be able to catch up on the books and the films and the records and the art and the TV shows and all the things that I haven't had the time to see, because firstly, culture keeps producing at an enormous rate, and secondly, because I'm always out seeing bands. I've got friends and work and offices and things like that. But for the past year, I've been sat in this room working every day, and it's exhausting. You know, I'm beginning to forget what I'm saying to people, because I tie my memories around, you know, places. So if I say something to somebody, I know I said that because I'm in that room, whereas every memory I've got of the past year working is I'm sat here in this room, looking at that window, seeing that view, and that is it. That's all there is. You know, 3 or 4 screens and about 1,000 video calls. And that's no way a criticism. But you know, the human body and the human psyche isn't necessarily built to live with a state of being in constant anxiety, constant worry. You know, we've been had to live with a global crisis in terms of health, and a global crisis in terms of economy, society, values, finding out sometimes who your real friends are, because some of your friends are okay with risking your health for their pleasure, and some of your friends aren't. You know, and then that makes you wonder, well, how did that affect other things? It's been a really hard year, and all the Zoom calls and the video calls, that they don't make up for having a giggle and a pint in a pub. They really, really don't. I mean, we as humans, as a race and a species, have adapted incredibly well to this situation, by and large. Some of us obviously really, really haven't, but most of us have adapted to this. And we were told by the government to stay at home, you know, hands, wash your hands, face, space, you know, stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives, all that stuff. And we did it because that's what we needed to do. And we as a society stuck together. But what we found is, you know, there was an implicit deal there with the government, which is, if we will do as you want us to do, you, the government, are tasked with taking us through this and playing your part and delivering on your promises. Of course, when Dominic Cummings drove to Barnard Castle to test his eyesight, because the normal rules don't apply to him because he's special and unique, what we found was there's, you know, one rule for them and one rule for us. And if we go out for a drive to test our eyesight, we could get fined or arrested. If they do it, they get to keep their jobs. They get 40% pay rises. And people have lost faith, and completely understandably, in the government and its ability to do its job properly, competently, and to deliver results. There's the thing about the PPE and the fact they've spent an enormous amount of money on PPE, which perhaps they could have spent far less and still got PPE. There's the fact that there's been corruption, cronyism. we very recently had the murder of Sarah Everard, and a man who works for the Metropolitan Police has been charged with that. And at the same point, we've got situations where people that are protesting because all they want to do is to be able to walk the streets safely, which is a very, very normal, reasonable, basic default standard of living. They're finding that the police are acting in a very oppressive manner to them. And I'm really worried about the world politically. I think that the UK is slipping towards fascism, towards authoritarianism, and away from governing by consent. But I am just one voice. And it's a cultural and social position which I never thought we'd ever get into. When I was younger and we went to history lessons, and you'd hear about Spanish flu, or you'd hear about the plague or the Second World War, somehow I thought maybe history was over, and that the history that would happen next would by and large be generally pretty damn stable. But that wasn't the case at all. And obviously when 9/11 happened, that was a once in a lifetime moment that would define our lives for decades to come. And the COVID-19 crisis is exactly the same. It will define the shape of our society and the whole of humankind's society for the next few decades that we will slowly, recover back from. But it's very, very strange, to go from an environment where we thought nothing of you just get in a car and you drive, or you get on a plane and you sit in a tiny little tube with hundreds of people, most, if not all of them, you've never met before, to go and see a band or to go and see a football match. And then all of a sudden, all that's gone away. And for someone like me, I mean, I have friends that live all over the world. Sorry, I've got a cat down here that's demanding I stroke his head. I've got friends that live all over the world in many, many different time zones. I'm very, very lucky in that respect. To me, my village is global. Obviously, Trump was the global village idiot. But my world is global. And to then be in a point where you can't see some of your best friends for years on end because of this, it's a massive change. And what we have to remember is, firstly, the human psyche wasn't built to survive in a sustained period of crisis. And this has absolutely what this is. This is a sustained period of crisis. It's a global health emergency. And we are no longer working from home, we're living at work. For those of us that are still able to have jobs. Sorry, I accidentally tickled the cat's ear there, hence I jumped. But also that as people, we can live with periods of uncertainty, we can live with periods of crisis, we can live with periods of having to be hyper aware of a vast number of events, in a state of heightened alert. But most human beings shouldn't have to live like that for a year or a year and a half. Before that, the longest period I had in terms of being, hyper aware of global events was September the 11th, 2001, when I was living and working in central London, right next to Buckingham Palace. And then the aftermath of that was days. Or maybe, I don't know, if you split up with somebody and you have a terrible break and you kind of live with what is actually a very, very small crisis on the global scale, but an enormous crisis on a personal scale, you're then kind of living with the knowledge that, okay, so I personally, one individual, I'm going through a terrible set of circumstances. And I've gone through some pretty terrible circumstances, sometimes in a sustained period that's lasted a number of months, but never anything this long, and never anything that's been this big and this huge in terms of its global impact. And we went to the point where all the things that we previously assumed have been thrown away. So, being able to go to a pub, I used to think nothing of going to a pub. Now I have to think about, is it worth it? Do I wear a mask? What do I do? And I've been to a pub twice since March the 7th, 2020. And then there's the situation where you kind of go and see a band. I've done that once since March the 7th, 2020. Situations where you kind of think, well, I'll go to London and buy some records. I've done that once. I did that in November. And that was the day before everything shut down. Um, so all of the ways in which I've had to live have had to be turned upside down. And then we've had to go and then put a whole new layer of thought into absolutely everything that we do, every interaction that we have with everybody. Am I standing too near? Am I standing too far? Am I wearing a mask? Should I be? Should I not be? London was shut down, and non-essential shops means that you can't buy trousers, you can't buy shoes. Specsavers was open. But you couldn't go and buy hair dye. Not that necessarily would be a bother for me. But obviously a lot of people that were famous that used to dye their hair suddenly turned white over lockdown. Obviously, I'm still dyeing my beard. Well, actually, I'm not. But these are all the things which have happened, and it's been very, very strange. Very strange indeed to think, well, you can't go to a museum, you can't go to a shop, you can't go to a pub. It's been a whole year of this. The highlight of my social life now, pretty much, is either when the postman delivers records that I've bought, hooray! Although that can happen any time between 8 a.m. in the morning and 9 o'clock at night, or when I look at the TV channel and I see what's on television. By the way, I could strongly recommend, if you're in the UK, a channel called Talking Pictures. Which has quietly become absolutely huge in the UK. It's got somewhere between 2 and 6 million people watching it, but it's playing all those films that I remember from my childhood. So things like The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, The Quilla Memorandum, Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, those type of things. And it's just films I remember wanting to know. So I'm kind of going back and I'm using this time to watch all the films that I've never seen, read all the books I've never read. Yeah, if you believe that, and listen to all the music. But it's been strange because sometimes the highlight of my social weekend at the moment, and this is not a criticism, by the way. Zoom calls are fantastic, but they are quite draining, and you can't go, I'm going to have a mobile phone break, which you do if you're in the pub. You go, I'm going to look at my phone for a couple of minutes, recharge, maybe have a drink and a sip, and a drink and feeling fine. But you go for that, and then you kind of get to the point where you suddenly realise, yeah, I'm really looking forward to watching, I don't know, the Ipcress File or something like that on television, even though you've already seen it. It's really strange, and it's been like this for a year. And then every trip that you take to the supermarket, you think, well, there's a degree of risk in that. So you limit your trips to the supermarket, and I buy the absolute maximum that I can fit into the freezer when I go. And the idea of doing something off the cuff is unheard of. Requires a degree of planning which is normally pretty substantial. It's all weird, and it's been a year of this, and I don't know when it's going to finish. And none of us know when it's going to finish. We think we're near the end now. But we thought we were near the end before. We thought we were near the end in June when the bars slowly reopened and there was Eat Out to help out. And we thought we were near the end, maybe October, after the second lockdown. But then that turned out to not be the case. And we had a government that were slow to respond, unclear in messaging, fundamentally did not help the people that needed to be helped. And it's been a really, really tough year. And I'm sure some of you that are watching this are people that I frequently see in the pub before we all go and see a band together and we start crying and drinking. And I miss you all. Apart from those of you who I haven't met, who subscribe to this channel, at some point, I'm sure we'll be able to have a drink again. The thing that's keeping me going through all of this is that it will come to an end. Because if the rest of the future is never going out, not having some degree of normality, never seeing a band again, that's really tough. You know, I frequently watch live shows on YouTube, and I'm like, I really miss it. I really miss just standing in a room with the people that made music that changed or saved my life, people that love that band, people that are my friends, and just going, yeah, this is my temple. This is, the stuff I always look forward to. Watching it on TV is not the same. It's, oh God, it's all hard. I don't need to tell you that. You know that. And it's not just that. It's that I don't see my friends. I don't see my family. It's good that I live with humans that I like and tolerate, and they kind of put up with me and laugh at my bad jokes, even though I say them every single day. But it never makes it any easier. It'd be nice to go out of the house and to go on a train and to meet someone in a pub and have a hug and talk bollocks and drink and all that stuff. Much as I love staying at home and stroking cats like a James Bond bad guy, it's not quite the same. Sorry, mate. He's down here getting all the love off me, by the way. Cheeky cat. And at the same point, we've got all of this uncertainty. The world won't go back to normal. We won't get back to the way things used to be. There'll be a new normal. I don't know, that's a very Alan Partridge, David Brent management speak phrase. But in the same way that, I don't know, if you fell over playing football when you were a kid and you got a scar, you've still got a scar there. Your knee might have healed, but you've still got the scar there. You've still got the memory. When we come out the other side of this, things are going to be different. There's not going to be a sudden snap back to going to 100 shows a year. I won't go to so many. In fact, I feel quite nervous about going to a large number of shows. So bands that are putting on shows for September, I'm kind of going, normally I'd be like, great, Sisters of Mercy, Camden, I'm there, Whereas now I'm kind of going, need to think about that. Not sure about that. Not sure about being in a crowded room with that many people. It's all strange. But I don't know what the world's going to look like at the other side of this. I really don't. I think the government have done a terrible job. Cat has got bored of being stroked, by the way. But I think the government have done a terrible job of managing this. And when I closed the door on my office, and I thought, we're back in 3 weeks, back in April. It's a year. And it's been hard for a lot of people. It's hard. It's difficult to kind of adapt to new ways of working, new ways of living, new ways of being. It's weird to think that sometimes the highlight of my week is reading a TV guide. It kind of feels like I don't live in a city. It feels like I live on an oil rig or something, because all I see really is the supermarket and the park, and maybe what's on the TV. What you've got to remember, and obviously I've not planned this, otherwise it would be less rambling, is we're working and living at home in the midst of a global health emergency, the likes of which both we have almost definitely not seen before and will almost definitely not see again in our lifetimes. There will be other crises, there will be other catastrophes, there will be other emergencies. There might be earthquakes, floods, avalanches, who knows? But there is this, and we're living in the middle of this, and it's okay to be weird, and it's okay to be scared, and it's okay to show people your cat or your dog in meetings. In fact, people are now asking me where my cat is during meetings, if the cat is asleep at my feet and doesn't want to turn up, which of course is where this cat actually is right now. And it's okay to be worried, and it's okay to be scared. It's normal. In fact, it'd be weird if you weren't. It would be really, really weird if you weren't. Um, and obviously, I've started doing this YouTube thing, um, which I wasn't expecting to do at all. But when I got 7 months in, and I'm like, I'm bored. And it's okay to be bored. It's like there's always so much news. There's so much stuff. Cutting down on caffeine. There's so much stuff. There's so much news. There's so many events. And every day there's a new thing, and you kind of go, really? That's a thing now? My God, and make no mistake about it. This country has lost a lot of people. It's lost 125,000 people. It's lost the equivalent of the population of a small town. More people have died than live in somewhere like Redditch or Solihull or Runcorn. It's a catastrophic loss to this country. And of the people that have had it, 1 in 10 has a very long tail of long-lasting side effects. And not everybody that's had it has tested positive. I'm fairly sure that in February last month, I had COVID and I was positive with it. All the symptoms all lined up, but my test was negative. And I had the vaccination on Sunday. And the side effects really kicked my backside. It felt like I'd had about a 4-day hangover. I still feel like I've been given a dead arm by the school bully where that happened. And apparently, the side effects of having a COVID vaccination are harsher if you have had COVID. So that is probably, in my assessment, very probably what happened. Actually, it's just been a really tough, hard year, and we need to be kind to ourselves and to other people, because you don't know what's going on in other people's lives. I don't know what's going on in other people's lives. And the thing that people put out on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and all those other things, it's a curated version of ourselves. This is a curated version of me, I think. But above and beyond all of that, the fact is, humans are beautiful and strong, and we will make our way through this. We've never faced anything like this. There's no roadmap for anything like this. There's no guidebook how to survive a pandemic. It probably is, actually. There is no right thing to do here. We've just got to keep trying at it. What matters, and this is what the boxer said, is it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down. What matters is how many times you get up. And that sounds horrendously self-belief. It should probably be on a poster with a picture of a mountain, an inspiring quote, alongside the quote that, Everest, all the dead bodies on Everest were once highly motivated people. Yeah, man. What a year. What a strange, weird year. And we've made it to this. So we've made it pretty much 1 year in lockdown, 1 year in society being closed down. It's really hard. Oh, God, I know it's hard. It's a struggle, and it's boring. Financially, it can be really, really tough. I think the government have massively failed the people of our country in making sure that they've been looked after and protected. And the fact is, we made it to a whole year through this. I don't know how much more of it there is to go, but I think we can do it. I just hope that mankind can point in the right direction, because there's an eternal battle. This sounds terrible, it sounds very biblical, but it's kind of true. There's a battle between good and evil, between right and wrong, between freedom and authoritarianism and all that stuff, and that's just always ongoing. Sometimes the scales tip one way and sometimes they tip the other. right now, they're not tipping in a particularly positive way. But like the cliche has it, the North will rise again, as indeed will the rest of the country, the rest of the world. We'll make it, and it'll be okay. And there'll be a time when we'll be in a room together, and we'll be seeing a band that we love, and we'll be singing and crying and dancing and drinking and hugging, and everything will be okay. I just don't know when that's going to be yet. We've been living through the strangest period of history that I can remember. And, I lived through Britpop, so there's been some pretty strange periods of history that I've lived through. But we've lived through the strangest period of history that I can recall. And we will be together again, I'm sure. In the meantime, I'm going to keep doing videos about old pop groups and records that I love and bands that I love and anything else that comes to mind. But in the meantime, 1 year in lockdown, my God, we made a strong fucking stuff, gang. I want to see you all again. I'm going to sign off here because I've suddenly got a sudden attack of sincerity, which is not very British at all. And also there's a cat, which I need to fuss. And he's certainly not patient when it comes to that. So, I'll see you all again. Don't be a dick in the comments. Stay beautiful. We'll meet again.